Well, hey everyone. Welcome to episode 340 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. This week, I had an absolute blast talking with legendary Florida swamp photographer Clyde Butcher. Clyde's work from the Everglades is world-renowned, and his name has been mentioned on the show many times when guests talk about photographers who inspire them. In 2017, Clyde suffered from a stroke. However, he has not let that slow him down one bit. And I'm so thankful that I was able to sit down with him and talk to him about his journey. Before we get going, I have some thank yous that I want to attend to. As you might know, I just got home from hiking 35 days on the Colorado Trail, where I hiked 520 miles and climbed 30 mountains. Whew, man. I was able to still release weekly episodes while on trail. Thank you to all of the amazing people who stepped up to support the show on Patreon while I was away, including Martin Lawrence, Richard Young, Krista Lappin, Stephen Bay, Kim Harding Christensen, Jeffrey Johnson, Steve Hall, Stuart Thompson, Thomas Friedrich, Laura Gordon, Pamela Sherlock, Amy Aiken, and Ruben Robles. I am just so blown away by the support from this community. You are all just amazing. I don't know what else to say. I'd love to give back more if I could. And one way that I hope to help out is providing you with as many free resources as I can to help you improve your photography. As you may know, I recently became a pro with the Munch Workshops team, and I'm excited to say that there are 3 great free ebooks that the Munch team has produced for you. One is called The Art of Luminosity, a wonderfully useful 60-page guide written by Mark Munch. This guide will explain different types of light and how to best leverage them in your photographs. If you'd like to check out these free resources, just head over to munchworkshops.com/photography-ebooks or find a link in the show notes. They're all fantastic, and best of all, they're free. All right. Let's get to this week's episode with Clyde Butcher. All right, Clyde Butcher, it is great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I see your T-shirt. Are you from Oregon?
No, I just taught at a photography conference in Oregon, but I did live there for a couple of years. I live in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was an artist in residence in Rocky Mountain National Park in '97.
That's amazing. That's when I graduated from high school.
Oh,
Man, I feel like artists in residency at Rocky Mountain National Park would be a dream come true for so many people.
oh, it was. It was the house I was staying in was what was the guy's name? He was a newspaper editor. He basically ran politics. He had a
Gotcha.
biography. He had a biography quote that they had done on him in the house. It was really interesting to see. After reading that biography, you wouldn't ever vote for anybody from Kansas.
All right. All right, well, Clyde,
Okay.
yeah, no worries. So, for people that haven't heard of you before, which is probably like 15 people, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Right now, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and we went to California when I was a freshman in high school. So I went to school out there, and then I went to college at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. I'm an architectural graduate. My introduction to photography, I couldn't draw. So what I ended up doing was making architectural models and photographing them. And that's how I really got into photography. And also, I was 62. I was a sophomore. I was dating my wife in Yosemite when I saw Ansel Adams' work. And my first thought when I saw this picture of the redwood trees, why would you photograph redwood trees unless the tree was for sale?
That's
I
an
mean,
interesting thought.
I was an architect. Use those trees for making houses.
Right.
So I've come a ways from that since then. And then eventually I had big business in California for, so I don't know, 10, quite a few years. Ended up doing clocks, picture clocks. I was the largest clock manufacturer in the United States.
Wow.
I had 200 people making pictures and clocks. We figure about 1 of every 10 houses had one of the picture clocks in the United States.
Really?
So I kind of got it kind of was a semi-commercial because painters would say, well, can you find something with a stream or something like this? And so I would, and then this was all color. I started out in black and white. And in school, doing color in the 60s, pretty tough. But I started doing some color probably in my architectural model work in about 66. So I was doing color work then. And now in color, I've always used color negative film
Hmm.
because I didn't want to be a good, how do I say this? I didn't want to be a good photographer. I wanted to be a good artist.
Ah, uh-huh.
And when you shoot transparency, you got to go there. I get a quarter stop. And color negatives, it's just like black and white. You can underexpose and do a different effect. You can overexpose, do different effects. So you can actually be similar to black and white with things you can do with negatives. You can't do with transparencies. If you shoot a transparency wrong, it's wrong. I think it was, let's see, 1979. I sold the business and came to Florida. Now, when I came to Florida, I didn't see anything here to photograph.
Right,
There was no mountains.
right.
It was just out west. I came
Yeah.
here for the
Why
I came here for
Florida? Why did you move
well,
to Florida?
I can't for the sailing.
Ah, okay.
I raised my kids on a sailboat.
Got it.
It's sailing out west, not easy. You're talking
No.
big waves and no anchorages. And it's just, but here in the East Coast, a lot of places you can jump out of your boat and walk and set your anchor.
Yep, yep.
I was in Mexico. We had 1,000 feet of anchor line out, and I was in 10 feet of water. Bank was like that. And trying to sail from Puerto Vallarta back to Newport Beach is uphill. It's a rough sail. So anyhow, I built a boat and brought it to Florida. We've been here since full time since 1980. And I think it was probably in 1680 I started photographing the beaches because I was shooting color. I went to color in probably in 1971 or 72 for sales. Because in '69 I was trying to sell black and white, and that was a tough. In fact, Ansel Adams went to color in '71. But I tell you, his color was really bad. Well, he was shooting the same way he shot for black and white.
Right.
It's a different animal.
It is a different animal for sure. In
Yes.
fact, I think we should share our little side conversation we had before we hit the record button because you saw my pictures behind me and you said, "Oh, there's a lot of color." And I said, "Oh, I dabble in black and white." And you said, "Don't. You should pick one or the other," which I thought was a
Right.
very bold statement.
Did Bruce Baumhaus tell you the same thing?
Bruce Baumbaum did not tell me the same thing.
Well, in his earlier interview, he did.
Okay.
And he's probably got criticized for that. It's just a whole different world, shooting black and white and color.
You have to look for tonality as opposed to
Right.
complementary colors, and so yeah, there's a difference for sure.
I see sunset.
Those are both sunrises. Yeah.
Well, same thing.
Well, kind of. I mean, getting to the top
Yeah.
of this mountain before sunrise is pretty challenging.
Oh, yeah. I have to get places in the Everglades before sunrise. And
Yeah.
I have to walk through the swamp for a couple hours to get
Right.
there.
Probably more dangerous.
Probably. Uh, but, back in Colorado, you got mountain lions, you got elk, you
Yeah.
got bison.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think I'd rather deal with those than gators.
oh, I'll tell you, I'll pick a gator any day.
All right. All right.
I've been charged by elk.
Yeah,
That's been
they can be
scary.
they can be pretty scary, but the real one you got to watch out for is the moose.
Yeah, yeah. I had problems with in Tetons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I get charged. It was because it was rutting season in Colorado. When I was artist in residence, Rocky Mountain National Park,
Right.
and this guy he had to be 100 yards, maybe 200 yards away. I was set up in an open prairie, and he's by some aspen, and had the tripod on the camera, and maybe he thought I was an animal of some sort with the legs and everything. But he came charging down to me, We got to about 8, 10 feet from me. I took my tripod. I was going to hit him over the head with it. You can't outrun him. But he turned about 4 feet away. That was pretty scary.
Oh man.
Yeah,
But you
it's
got the shot, right?
oh yeah.
Good, good, good.
But taking, I wasn't shooting him though. I was shooting the aspen.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
I tried to photograph a buffalo with an 8x10 camera. That was hysterical.
Right. Nothing's in focus.
Well, you get in focus, then you move, and it's just you start fighting. And,
Right.
yeah, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyhow, in Florida, you got gators, water moccasins. We got deer. I almost got hit by a deer here in Florida. He was charged through the swamp and dismissed me. But I'll take the gators over out west stuff.
Well, maybe that's a great segue for one of the questions I had planned on asking you. I'm really curious what kind of measures you take to ensure your safety and your equipment safety when you're out photographing in the swamps.
I don't worry about it. That's how you take care of it. No, you real. I'm serious. If you're not even thinking about it, I don't think the gator. I think these animals can sense if you were worried. I've only had 2 occasions I've had to hit a gator in the nose. That's how you charge you. You have to just bop them in the nose. They'll take out.
What do you hit them with?
Well, either a tripod or your fists.
I love it. So
Yeah,
you
but
just
that's
you just box with them, huh? You're just like
yeah.
back, get
Oh,
back.
yeah. Well, you hit them right on the nose. That's the most sensitive spot. Kind of like a shark, I guess.
Gotcha. So you've never had any other close encounters with them in terms of like trying
No,
to take your
I,
leg or
I
anything like
I
that?
got hit by a water moccasin.
Yeah.
I was going to photograph the ghost orchid. In the swamp. There's so much contrast for black and white. You have to photograph just before sunrise, so you have this even
Right.
light.
Yeah, super even. Yeah,
Right,
super easy to process. Yeah.
right. So I was living at the gallery that time. We built the gallery in Big Cypress in '93, but I was not. This was in 1999. So I went to get in the car at 4:30 in the morning without a flashlight. I stepped on him, and so I say, "Yeah, get in my car." And I got stepped on a water moccasin. Never got bit out in the swamp. I was getting into my car,
That's funny. That's
but
funny.
it didn't hurt too bad. It's amazing how hard they are hit, like a hammer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the most exciting things.
I'll let you handle that because I do not like poisonous snakes and I definitely do not like things with sharp teeth.
Well, you got rattlesnakes out there.
We do have rattlesnakes. I've had a few close encounters with them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Um,
not at the real high altitude though. You
no,
get above
mostly when I go out into the desert, like in Utah. Yeah.
California deserts.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
We
a lot of
just
nasty, there's a lot of nasty stuff out in California deserts.
the worst is Australia. Basically everything in Australia can kill you.
You can have it in Australia. Florida is much more exciting to photograph.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much here to photograph. I don't need to go to it anywhere.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. What draws you to photograph in the Everglades? What makes them so special?
Well, we were going to an art show up in Winter Park and up on the midst of the state, and there was a little curio. People sell little plastic gators and what tourist stuff. And my wife wanted to stop, and I was saying, I don't want to stop this. That's kind of boring. So finally, she made me stop. There was a sign out there on the road: if you won't stop, take your shoe off and hit him in the head for your wife. So we were there. I was talking to Tom, and Nicky was having a good time, and he could tell I was pretty bored. And he says, "Oh, we have a boardwalk in back. Says you might enjoy that." And because I never had gotten out in the woods before because of all the snakes and gators and all that stuff you hear about. This boardwalk took me into the heart of Everglades. Now, but it was a boardwalk this wide. It wasn't handicap accessible.
Right. Like 2 feet wide.
It was a boardwalk. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like nailed to trees,
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty, but I got me out there, and it reminded me a lot of the redwood forest,
Hmm.
real similar to the redwood forest, and it just turned me on. And the same week I was going to a camera store in Fort Myers, and the owner was looking at some slides. I was looking over his shoulder, and I said, "You just get back from Africa?" No. "Well, where's that?" He says, "Just down the street." So I said, "Can you take me there someday? I'd like to see it." He says, "How about right now?" So he put me in his truck, and off we went to Big Cypress. I never have gotten out since.
So
He,
what is your favorite part about photographing in the swamps?
it's primeval.
Yes.
It's primeval. It's a living machine. I mean, out west there's a lot of rocks. Who wants to photograph rocks? What do? They just sit there year after year. I go back to Yosemite every once in a while, and half of them are still sitting there.
Right.
You know, so no, it's such and it's always changing. I go to the same place every year. It's different because of the weather.
Hmm.
Sometimes you have a hurricane, the whole island disappears, and sometimes the whole shore, the whole thing just keeps changing. It's kind of fun. So you can, of course, if you go back to the spot you wanted to go back to and it's gone, it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So it's just there's so many different things here to photograph, but you have to get into it though. You can't shoot it from your car.
Well, let's talk about some of the more technical aspects of photographing in the swamp. In terms of composition, I'm sure that photographing in the swamps is quite challenging. You've got all of this chaos, all this moss, and just this stuff everywhere. What are your tricks for organizing the chaos of the swamp to make a pleasing composition?
The idea that is the idea is making simplicity out of the chaos. Because when you have chaos, which is same as out west or New England, usually if it's really chaos, that means it's probably pretty much primeval, natural. If it's not chaos, man's probably screwed it up. Basically, everything I do is point and shoot. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I see something that's interesting, I set the camera up and shoot it. I mean,
So
it has to
it's
draw.
mostly
It's
intuition.
it's all up to intuition.
Hmm.
One of the tricks is too is wide angle. You can't use long lenses in the swamp because therefore, see with wide angle you can actually separate a subject. With long lenses you can't separate. Does that make any sense?
It does. I have a friend of mine, David Thompson, who shoots a lot with a 70 to 200 in the swamp, and he makes some pretty gorgeous images. But I can see where that would
Those are
be
pictures.
very.
Those are pictures of things,
Oh,
not feelings of things.
interesting.
That's I have to. If you relate it to 35 millimeter, I shoot between 10 millimeter and 20.
Uh huh.
Most of it's 15 to 8, 17.
Now, what
Uh,
about when you were capturing images in large format? Because I'm guessing it was a little bit longer
okay,
when you were using that.
well you have to, yeah. On 8 by 10, I had my two main lenses, well three lenses. The widest was 90 millimeter.
Right.
That was an XL, which is you get like a 6 by 10 image. Then the next one was a 120 Nikkor, and then the next one was a 150 Super Angulon. And the other things I shot out west, I did a little bit with the 420, some with the 210, but even out west, my favorite's wide angle. Even out west, looks like you're using some pretty wide angle there.
Actually, that was like 45, and that was probably that was like 100.
Yeah, the one you said 45. For most people out west, that's a short lens.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to shoot closer to 100 to 400 a lot more, but depends on the scene.
Yeah, but to get people into the swamp, It's very intimate, and if you have too much distances, you can't get involved. One of the problems with film, when you're photographing inside the swamp, your exposures run from about 1 minute to 10 minutes.
Right.
So that means nothing can move for 10 minutes.
Right.
It's a little bit of a difficulty.
Right.
But with the digital, you can talk 30th of a second, 60th of a second, it's a whole different world,
Mm-hmm.
which has been fun because like outdoors with large format, bright sun is 1 second.
Right.
That's bright sun.
Right. And you're like F64 or something.
Well, either 45 or 64.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, depending how a lot of stuff you can shoot at 45.
Right.
I've shot maybe 3 or 4 pictures over the years with 22.
Yeah. Right.
But 32, but basically 45 is my standard f-stop. Um, for some reason, it's a little different in large format. With the way the large format lenses are designed, they're designed for f22.
Hmm.
That's the sharpest. When you get down smaller, it gets, well, you can't get anything in focus. It gets smaller. I mean smaller like, f8 or
Right.
you can't.
Yeah. Your depth of field is so shallow.
0, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but with the digital cameras, if you 17 millimeter lens with at f16, everything's in focus,
Right. Yeah.
and that's really nice. Now, what I've been doing lately though is made it more difficult. I took my Fuji and had it converted to black and white. So now I've got to add a filter and kill a couple of f-stops.
Right.
So I'm going back to longer exposures with the black and white. But I don't think people understand. Like you've got some blue skies there in your swimming pictures. Only 1/4 of the pixels are in that sky.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Blue is 25%. So with mine, it's 100%.
Right.
So my skies are much more even. The you can't even really screw up with it. You get noise. In black and white, it's hard to get noise.
Right.
Not black and white in a color camera. With black and white, and you have the camera converted. It's a whole. People think, oh, you just convert your color. No, I'm shooting black and white.
Yeah. I
And
suppose
that's
that
what.
helps a lot in terms of pre-visualization as well.
Well, it's also it's you got sharper pictures, and it looks more like film.
Right.
Yeah. Now, all the lenses I use now, I do not know how to use a modern lens. I can't. I don't know how to focus with autofocus. That sounds strange. So, all the lenses I have your f-stop and put the f16 on whatever you focus by range.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
don't focus by. I never focus with a camera. So everything I use, most of everything, every lens I have is a tilt and shift lens
Yeah.
or shift.
I was gonna ask you about tilt shift because I understand you're using a lot of that in your work now, and I'd
Yeah.
be curious to hear you talk a little bit about how you're using tilt shift in your work.
Oh, it's really exciting. You got one lens. I think it becomes 4 or 5 lenses because okay, you have the 17, and then when you shift to the right and left, it becomes a 13.
Right.
And then you take the camera and keep the camera horizontal, but shift up and down.
Right.
So, and then you can actually use it without a shift. So you can really kind of fit the scene. It's really easier to.
Yeah, and
Uh,
the stitches are so clean. I mean, I'm guessing
oh
you're using the Canon 17f4.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and then you're just and
but
then
F22 though.
right,
No,
right, and then
F16, not F22.
yeah,
That one
f16.
that one's pretty sharp. I have the 17, the 24,
Yeah,
the 50, the 90, and the 135.
yeah.
Then I have a Pentax 645 lenses work pretty good.
And are you? converting those onto a Sony back or to your Fuji?
Uh, well, for both.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the Sony is more usable than the Fuji
Gotcha.
because when I do my because now I also have devised ways to do a double shift.
Yeah, yeah,
So
because you can rotate the lens and then shift up and down, rotate the lens again, shift left and right.
no, you don't rotate the lens.
But you
There's a
could.
shift on the lens, and there's a shift on the adapter.
Right, right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So you don't have
What
to
adapter are you using?
Metabone
Okay.
for the Canon lenses,
Yep.
and all the other ones are like just cheap things. Oh, he's gone.
Sorry, I had to get mine because I've got the Metabones, and this is the 90
90,
Canon. Yeah.
90, yeah, yeah. I've got I got the old 90.
Right. This is the old one as well.
I saw it, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's pretty sharp.
It's not bad. Yeah.
It's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
But the new 50 is spot on, boy. It's sharp, and they have a 135 now, which
Right.
is really sharp.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So, are you doing any creative work in terms of tilting and using the
Oh,
depth of
okay.
field, or what's
Well, depth of field is basically all I'm using because in short lenses, well, for one thing, if you have any vertical close to the camera, you can't use a tilt
right?
because the top will be out of focus, the bottom will be out of focus.
Right.
But if you have an open field, you really get some good stuff with the tilt.
Right.
But
How
this,
far out? Like with a 15 or 17?
well, I mean the tilt.
Yeah, yeah. Like how far out should the subject be before, in order to
Oh,
maximize that?
well, you could. I photographed flowers probably 2 feet from them
Yep.
to infinity
Yeah.
in focus
Right.
at f4.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think a lot of people have messed around with it, but basically, you're taking the lens and you're changing the plane of
Right.
focus so that it's
Well, the
tilted.
90 is really important.
Yeah.
Like some of the shots you have there of the mountains, that'll really work nice. But I don't think I don't understand that how you can be a landscape photographer without a tilt and shift lens.
Yeah. Well, they're rare. Like Sony doesn't even have any native tilt shift.
I do not own a Sony or a Fuji lens. They
That's
don't make any
awesome.
lenses for me at
Right,
all.
right. Yeah.
You know,
Well, you could
I
switch
got
over to Nikon.
those are terrible. You can't. Those are terrible to convert. God,
Shots fired.
Nikon's Nikon. Nikon. You can use the old Nikon lenses, but the new ones you can't even use.
Right. Yeah,
And
no, I
19 millimeter, the only way to use that is with tilt and shift 19. You've got to get a Nikon camera, get the whatever f-stop you want, and you turn the camera off, take it off, and it'll stay at 16. And then you put it on your camera. So you have to have a camera to adapt the f-stop.
right.
So that's kind of nuisance.
Totally.
Yeah,
Well, we
but
could probably talk about gear for like 6 hours, but I want to
oh
dive into
yeah,
some meteor subjects. So, getting back to Florida and all that, I'm curious in your long time of photographing there, what changes have you seen in Southwest Florida over your time photographing it?
well, actually, we've got some areas that they've restored, mainly restoring the water. But the weather is like right now. Last year, last 2 years, we had bad hurricanes. Not this year, but last year we had one that went up, started from the coast, went up the middle of the state. I had a whole thing planned. Everything was wiped out.
Oh,
They
wow.
just wiped out because for my work, you need texture in the leaves, and you need to have happy plants. Plants weren't happy;
Yeah, right.
they were all pissed off. So there's areas. There's so many. There's the springs now. I'm shooting the springs. Some of the rivers. Some of the rivers are gorgeous. There's one river called the Santa Fe where it meets the Swanee. And I've measured cypress trees 53 feet in circumference.
Wow.
They're like probably 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And there's 5 or 6 miles of straight. Of course, a lot of those trees have gotten cut down.
Hmm.
They make really good houses.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah.
Well, actually, during World War II, they were using the cypress for the decks on their aircraft carriers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that just
Then,
because it's so hard, or?
yeah, it
Hmm.
has resistance to rot.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
They live in water.
Right. They're pretty good at that, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But Florida is very. If you want to do sunsets, there's some gorgeous sunsets here.
Right.
Uh,
No,
you
I feel like I would be like you. I'd be attracted to the swamps.
Yeah, it's you just feel like it's the beginning of time.
Right. All right.
Uh,
Prehistoric.
it really is. Then the different times of the years, there's different kinds of orchids out, or some neat stuff. And I've done some bird photography, but usually from my house. Our house and behind the gallery, the house is exactly in the center of the Everglades. So out the front porch, it's like a IMAX theater, and it's 2 stories. On the second story, I have a Pentax 6.7 camera with a 1200 millimeter. So I have it set up on the porch, and it's air conditioned. So when I see some neat birds, I just go up to the porch, open the window up, and that's my bird photography.
Nice. So I'm
Oh,
curious. I have another question for you about the swamps. It probably doesn't affect your work as much because of shooting in black and white, but I'm curious, how do seasonal changes in terms of fall, winter, spring, summer affect the character of the swamp?
oh, it's tremendous change. Fall starts in September, and then of course spring starts in March. People come down the gallery from up north. They say, "Oh, your whole forest dies. The trees are all there's no leaves in the trees. They're all dead." And I say to them, "Well, how are your trees doing in Ohio right now?"
Right.
Because it's warm, they don't figure the leaves should fall, the needles fall. And
Okay.
the cypress trees are kind of interesting too. There's male and female trees.
Oh.
One of them has the stamen, and the other has the egg.
Huh.
You have to have trees to mate.
I did not know that.
It's you learn more and more as you get by. Because the fellow that I met there in Fort Myers, his name's Oscar Thompson. He's fifth generation, and he used to live with the Indians. He really introduced me to Florida, and he told me where to look out for gators, where to look out for snakes, and so that's a help if you understand where you don't want to go, or if you do go there, where you should be very aware.
Right. Get your boxing gloves ready.
Yeah, well, like the first you walking into the swamp, the first 5 or 6 feet is most dangerous.
Gotcha.
That's where the water moccasins are really trying to eat frogs, raccoons. They try on the shores where their food is.
Hmm.
You're out in deep water. There's nothing there to eat.
So are you doing photography out on a boat then?
More, yeah, some boat, but because when I was doing my 8x10, I was on a boat, but to take a picture, I had to get out of the boat, put the tripod down.
Right.
So basically, when I was shooting film, everything was in the water.
Hmm.
I might use a
Right.
boat to get somewhere, but you have to get out of the boat.
Yeah. And your tripod is down in the water.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So you had to have really long legs, I'm assuming.
No, no, a lot of them. It's only maybe 3 or 4 feet deep,
Okay.
but unless it's mud,
Right.
there's a trick for mud, which a lot of people don't like to do. But the only way you can shoot in mud in a large format is to float in the water during the exposure.
Hmm.
You have to swim up to the camera, turn it on, and you count to your 4 or 5 minutes. And you swim up to the camera, turn it off. Because if you stay in the water, in mud, that you cannot stay still for that long
Oh,
time.
right. And then it
And there's
moves the tripod and yeah.
well, there's also twigs, limbs, and you ever try still for 4 minutes? not
Yeah,
move a muscle,
it's impossible.
not yeah, not you're going wait for your left foot to right. It can't be done. I tried this shot behind the gallery when I first started living there, and for 2 weeks I was out there every day trying to take a picture. And every time the camera would move during the exposure, I took out concrete blocks and took them on the thing. I did everything you could think of. And finally, I decided, well, try this. I like swam, I floated in the water, and because I didn't touch the water, and it came out perfect. So that's I've become kind of an expert on different kinds of muds in Florida.
Got
Like
it.
in the Keys, the mud's kind of like wet concrete. And in Big Cypress, usually I have mud for most of the time from like 2 inches to 4 or 5 inches. Then you get into the Cypress domes, you can have 7 feet of mud.
Oh
So
my
there's
gosh.
no way you hit the bottom of the tripod. So therefore you have to float in the water to take a picture.
Yeah.
You have to adapt. That's why digital is so fun,
Right, because you can use your shutter speed and yeah.
right? Because you're not shooting F45,
Right.
shooting F11. Well, some of wide angle lenses shooting at F8. Oh
Right.
God,
Yeah.
never heard of F8. I might, yeah, yeah. My large format lenses, the largest f-stop is f5.6,
Right.
and you never shoot less than 22, mostly 45.
Yeah.
But f8, no.
That's funny. Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask you some more personal questions about your photography. I'm curious what your intent is with your photography and what do you hope that it accomplishes?
Well, the reason I'm using the kind of lenses I'm using to do what I'm doing is give you a feeling of Florida. Because most people, okay, I've taken photographs with people with me, and when I show them a print, they will swear they weren't there. So I'm learned to get able to get people draw into the photographs, so they almost feel like they're in the mud, they're in the water. If you can't really feel a spot, I don't think you can relate to it. That's where out west I use a lot of wide angle because I want to get that same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel that people feel like they're there. It's done a lot of politics has been difficult. It's done a lot of good. My photography's done a lot of good because when I work, this is something that other photographers don't particularly care for. When I work for the government, the state, environmental groups, I don't charge them for anything, and I just feel it's my contribution to taxes.
Sure.
Because you can do a lot more if you don't have to write a PO.
Right. Yeah. You have a little bit more artistic freedom because it's
Yeah, if it's bad, that's too tough.
right. Sorry, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and also I think I've done one project that they paid for my expenses, and it was very nerve wracking,
Oh, yeah. It can be, yeah.
but it came out well. I did a whole series for the Dali Museum in Spain, and to show where he works, where he got his inspiration from. I had to fill a 9,000 foot museum, square foot museum. I had 9 days,
Oh, wow.
filled 5,000 square feet.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but it came out good.
So so going back to what you said you want to instill a feeling through your photographs. I think most people can understand the why behind that, but maybe you can talk about the how.
Well, how is you have to be able to hit people in the photograph, and okay,
Not literally,
well, kind of literally,
but I mean, you're not putting models in your scenes.
no,
Right.
but okay, the main pictures I have for the museums are 8 foot long.
Uh huh.
Okay, and if to get the okay, why do you think I make them big? Why do you think?
Because it's so much more immersive.
Well, I make them big so you can't see them. Does that make any sense?
It kind of, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, there's no
Yeah.
end to it.
Well, the angle, people don't understand the angle of view you see. Your eyes, 4 degrees. You perceive maybe 180 degrees. You only see four.
Uh-huh.
So to experience a photograph, you have to scan it.
Right.
And that gives you the feeling. That's where when you're driving a car, you're scanning all the time because otherwise you're not going to survive.
What about in terms of the image capture process itself? How can you instill feeling through that?
Well, most of the time you have to have a way of walk a person through the picture. Most of my successful pictures, really, there's no in the center of this picture. There's nothing.
Hmm.
Most people are trying to take a picture of something. I'm trying to take a picture of a feeling,
Hmm.
and most of the time, the successful ones have no center subject at all.
So you're using a lot of negative space in the center?
I'm using trees, bushes, plants to walk you through the
Mm-hmm.
picture. You got these different levels, and I think that's how I do it. Because if I look at it, if I feel happy about where I'm standing, I set my tripod down, put the camera down, and focus. I do not use the camera for composition. I use the camera to take a picture. I do the composition here. And there's one little trick that people don't realize. You have to, if you're going to start doing it without using the camera, you're ready to take a picture. You got to close one eye. You can't look with both eyes because that gives you 3 dimensions.
Right.
And you're working on 2 dimensional plane. So you got to put your brain on a 2 dimensional plane. That's kind of a trick too. It's that the 2 dimensional plane.
Right. Well, and through the composition, you're then creating that three dimensionality.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
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 And that
Using
has to
all
do, I'm guessing for you, as it is for me, a lot of that has to do with where you place different objects within the scene to help create that sense of depth.
right. Right. To me, it feels right or wrong. Now, if you take more than probably 2 pictures a day, you're not doing well. If you can get 2 pictures a day, you're doing a hell of a job.
Well, not everyone's a not everyone's as good as others. Let's just say that.
Well, you've got to learn how to see, and you just get shotgun and shoot.
For sure. For sure.
So, and because in the swamp, you're working with all kinds of Florida, you're working with all kinds of different problems.
Right.
So you'll see a scene that's got all kinds of options, but you got to find the right one.
Right.
And occasionally, I've had good days. I had usually out west, I can find more shots quicker. Badlands. I had fantastic. The weather was just absolutely terrible. It's great.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, I got 22 shots in 2 days
See? It can be done.
with film.
Right. Yeah.
You just don't get a day that's just outrageous.
Right. Yeah, no, it's not common. I agree with that.
I've had another day at Loxahatchee River. I got, I think, 12 shots in a day.
Yeah.
And those were all 6 minute exposures.
Right. I mean, I feel when I'm on my trips, I feel like if I can get one or two images a day, I feel pretty good about that. So,
Well, you can shoot a bunch of images really good.
yeah. No, for
Uh,
sure. I mean, good ones.
if you can get one good image,
Yeah.
then you're doing great.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well,
Two is lucky.
yeah. Well, Clyde, so I put it out there to our listeners. All of my listeners had some questions for you.
Sure.
So I'm going to kick it off. So one of our listeners, Barbara Laveri, she's also a Florida resident. She would love to know what you think we photographers can do to further conservation and environmental causes, such as water quality issues in Lake Okeechobee. I don't know if I said that right.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Or the Send It South campaign for the Everglades.
Well, one of the things like I was saying before, you get together with Sierra Club or Audubon, find out what projects they're working on, and you work with them, and you don't charge them
There you go.
because they're environmental organizations. They don't got any money. You know, they're fighting the battle against corporations. So you got to work with them. That's what I have done. It's just, what are you working on? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, how can I fit into this puzzle?
Right, right.
Yeah.
You have to. You can't wait for them to approach you.
And why do you think that is important for landscape photographers to think about?
Well, what kind of tools are these organizations going to be able to use to get somebody to say, "Oh, this is worth saving"? I mean, like right now, one of the main problems is global warming. One of the problems with global warming, like when we had smog problems in LA, it was easy to fight smog because you could see it.
Right,
You can't see carbon dioxide.
right,
So it's a hard problem. That's a hard project to work on to convince people that unless you go to a forest in Idaho that's all been chewed up by bugs because
right.
it's too hot.
Yeah, beetle kill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just been really. I was up in Idaho, whole forests are just beetled up.
Yeah, it's pretty bad here in Colorado too.
Well, and that's hurting global warming because those trees have been taking out the carbon dioxide.
Right, they're no longer
Now they're
sequestering CO2. Yeah.
yeah, they're dead. Now they're not doing anything. They're doing the opposite, creating methane.
Right, because they're decaying. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that so it's basically you have to think about what needs to be said.
Okay. I had another question for you. So, likewise, how do you feel about the political and social climate as it exists today relating to photography and conservation efforts, specifically perhaps at the state level there in Florida?
Well, well, we have probably we have a really rough time here in Florida right now. But this Santos is absolutely insane.
Well, you just had like half of our listeners have like already thrown something at the screen or whatever. So no, I'm just
Well,
kidding. I'm just
no,
trying to
that's
provide some levity because
well,
politics
that's
are never what people want to hear about. But I can get us back on track. So, because
okay.
my understanding is that the political environment in Florida is not super favorable for environmental issues, and I'm just curious, kind of what you feel like could be some solutions if you're a photographer who's frustrated by that.
The only solution is for good people with political. Uh, I've had environmental colleges students come to the gallery. They can walk through the swamp, and when they get through walking through the swamp, these are guys who are taking environmental courses,
Hmm.
okay, and we ask them how many of you want to run for office? No, I can never do that.
Right.
So how are you going to fix your environment if you have dummies running for office?
That's tough. That's
You
tough.
know, so and run for office today is really bad because they just put you down.
Oh yeah, you get run through
There's
the
no
mud for sure.
there's no sanity right now in running for office.
Right. They take the candidate and they put him in that 4 foot deep Florida mud.
Well, Florida is bad. I hope other states are doing better than we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like a roller coaster right now.
Yeah,
All
it's
right. Well, I have a couple more listener questions for you.
okay. Okay.
Mark Munch would like to know how your transition from large format 8x10s to mirrorless cameras went. Specifically, what do you enjoy about each style of image capture?
Well, well, it went really well because of the tilt and shift lenses.
Okay.
I could do the same thing in my digital world I did in my camera world, film.
And would you say that the tilt shift lenses to some degree help to emulate some of the camera movements you could do with bellows and whatnot?
Okay, you're taught in large format photography, the camera back, not the front, the
Yeah.
back. So it has to be perfectly level in both directions.
Right, right, right,
No tilt up, no tilt down.
right,
How are you gonna do that with a normal lens?
right.
You have
You're
to have
not.
to be a landscape photographer. You have to use tilt and shift lenses. Period. That's just my I think I know you correct it in Photoshop. It doesn't look right. Um,
Shots fired, Clyde, because I bet about 95% of the people listening are like, I've never even used a tilt shift lens.
I know because like Sony doesn't want to make them because it's expensive to make them,
Yeah.
and they said, well, I guess Canon's got it covered, you know. So like Fuji wanted me to do some work with them to promote their camera, and I said, okay, well, you gotta give me some of your tilt and shift lenses so I can use that.
They're like,
Well,
what's
we don't
that?
have those. We don't have any of those.
Right?
I say, well, I'll use my Canon lenses. If you want me to use it, I'll use the Fuji, but I'll use Canon lenses.
Right. And then they're like, oh, never
And
mind.
last time they called me,
Right. No, I mean, I can see what you're saying because there's just certain things you can do with a tilt shift that are just not possible otherwise.
you just try to take a picture without tilting your camera,
Right.
ever tilting your camera. How many pictures can you take that way?
Right.
Horizon right in the center.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a whole different ball game for sure.
If you're going to do like a real photographer, you've got to have that camera level.
No, it's always interesting because I think we're always informed by our past, right? So most people listening probably started digital and never even had access to tilt shift lenses.
Oh no, they never know what film is.
Right. Right.
You
So
know,
they've never known the difference, you know?
but it's interesting with the digital. You can do a lot of things you can't do, and vice versa.
Right.
Like one of the first really good techniques with film, you have a long exposure, you have what's it called reciprocity failure,
Yep.
and you get a whole different light on the negative. It's
Hmm.
just beautiful. You lose f-stops, but the results you get you just can't get with digital
Hmm.
because the digital is a straight line.
Right.
Or
Linear.
film has a curve at the bottom and a curve at the top.
Right.
So you can play with the highlights and the shadows, which you can play with the highlights and shadows in Photoshop, but you can't play it with on taking a picture.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. All right. I have another listener question for you. So, my friend Wayne Suggs refers to you as a master of photography, and his thing right now is he feels like a lot of the new photographers just have no idea about you or other kind of quote unquote great photographers that kind of came before us. What do you think upcoming photographers can do to learn from the masters, and what benefits can it bring to our individual craft?
How about reading, researching? Go back and find out how Ansel Adams. He has three books, one on the camera, one on the negative, one on the darkroom. You see, you can apply that information to digital.
Yeah.
So I think people just have to try to. Well, it would be good if they tried to do film.
Why?
Probably one.
Why?
Well, it's just slower. Yeah. Okay. You got to take a picture. You got to load the film, particularly in large format. It, like what I would do shooting a day of shooting, you have to spend 2 hours at night unloading and loading the film. So when you have to develop the film, then you have to make proofs. So you're really concerned when you shoot one shot. You're saying, "I've got a lot of work to do with that one shot. Do I just frivolously take a picture?
Right. It
It's a lot of work.
forces
It
you
costs
to really, really, really hone in on the smaller details and
well,
make sure that everything is dialed in perfectly.
an 8 by 10. It's $10 for a sheet of film and $10 to have it processed.
That's just
So
money, Clyde. I'm just
every
kidding.
shot's $20.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an incentive to not just go like if you shoot 36 exposures, that's $720.
Right. Yeah. It's no laughing matter for sure.
No. Well, I did a trip across the country in 3 months. I shot 1,700 sheets of film. It was $25,000 in film.
Yeah. That's
A
like
lot
a
of people
car.
shoot. Yeah, well, yeah. A lot of people shoot 1,700 shots a day.
Uh huh.
Took me 3 months to do that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
lot. I shot a lot.
Right.
It's a lot of shooting.
And what percentage of that do you think were keepers?
Well, that's a relative question. Which ones I were bad I couldn't use? Maybe 10%.
Oh, okay.
But what I've used some of it, probably out of the 1,700 shots, probably 30 maybe
30
that I
total.
actually used. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right. I think that's my hit ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you hear the thunder in the
Yeah, I was
background?
wondering if that was thunder. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're in Florida.
Right. So it's basically all the time, right?
Well, that's what I love in the summertime. See, one of the problems that people have when it comes to shoot in Florida, they come in the cool months in winter. It's it's not pretty. You got to come in the summer when it's hot, rainy.
Right. There's sweat dripping off of
Right,
everything.
right. I mean, I was one shot of ghost circuit I did. My glasses were fogging up. My loop was fogging up. My ground glass was fogging up. The lens was fogging up. Just trying to get all that. I mean, it was just it's stuff when you're shooting 80% of the humidity,
No doubt. No doubt.
and it's 90 degrees.
Do you ever
But
use anything to reduce the condensation?
I never have. I probably should, but it's a little scary.
Right. Right.
Putting stuff on your lenses.
I know. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'll just wipe it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Clyde, I got one more question for you. Who are a few photographers that you would recommend that we learn more about?
Well, one that you apparently had to talk with last week was
Bruce
yeah,
Barnbaum.
Warrenbaum. Yeah. Uh, John Sexton.
Uh huh.
Of course, Ansel Adams. And a real
Who's
sleeper
that?
is
No, I'm just kidding.
well, one of the sleepers that a lot of people don't know about it is Win Bullock.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's he was for the time he was photographing, he was pretty far out. But there's a lot of just go on the internet, put in black and white photographers and black and white photography. Maybe you'll get something. Those the old guys like Ansel Adams has those 3 books: how to use the camera, how to use how, how to process film, how to make prints, and that basically using the same concept as Photoshop.
Yes.
I developed my Photoshop techniques exactly like I do with film, and my if you do things like Scott Kelby, you're in trouble. He's too accurate.
Huh.
You can if you Photoshop. I think one of the problems with Photoshop is you're too accurate.
Huh. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before.
Well, it is because in film photography, you burn and dodging. You're using your hands.
Uh huh.
You're like this.
Right, right.
Burn something. How accurate is that?
Not super.
Not super accurate.
Right.
And so you can use Photoshop in the same way. I've developed my own. I only use like 3 tools.
Yeah.
One of the main tools I use is people don't use the eraser. And the
Right.
other one's history brush,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other one is gradients.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's those. Yeah, I don't count the histogram. That's not a tool. It's just a
Yeah. It's just a visual display of data.
right. Like for instance, when you use a gradient, you can use it just like in the darkroom because you can control the contrast and such in that gradient. Not just a gradient, but you can control the contrast in the gradient.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think there's all kinds of little simple things that make it. Uh, I can usually do a picture. If it takes you more than 5 or 6 minutes to do a picture, you're doing something wrong. So what I do is I start it. If it takes me more, if I get into 10 minutes, I just throw it away, start over. People are they want to keep all their layers.
Yeah. I hear
I
you.
think most I ever have at one time is 2.
Yeah. I typically don't have a lot myself, but I like to keep it simple.
Yeah, and it is simple, but and that's I call mine my Photoshop for idiots. It's so simple.
Yeah, no, it makes it more enjoyable, I think, too.
Well, I
But some
think
people really like it, you know?
how are we doing our Photoshop on the internet?
I'm gonna put it up soon. I can send it a link when it's on.
Okay.
I'll put it on YouTube.
We're putting our Photoshop techniques on YouTube pretty soon.
Okay, cool. All right,
So
we'll check it out.
we used to sell a DVD. We said that is give it away.
Perfect.
'Cause so many people say I can capture it in the camera. That's bullshit. You cannot capture it in the camera. Tell me one photographer that's a successful, great photographer that doesn't do burning and dodging.
Right, doesn't do any editing. I don't think
Yeah.
I can think of a single one, but that's me.
I have one picture that all I have to do is get exposure.
That's
There's no burning and dodging.
right.
You got one out of
Yeah.
60 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we'll be sure to put that link in the show notes when you send it over. But Clyde, this has been super fun, and I've had a really great time listening to you and learning about your journey. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. Well, thank you to Clyde and his great team, including Paul Tilton, who helped to make this conversation a reality. Special thanks to listener Steve Rosendahl, who helped tremendously by linking me with Clyde's team to make this possible. I'm also very glad that we were able to get this episode recorded because Clyde is such a legend. I encourage you all to check out Clyde's work by visiting the full show notes on my blog at mattpaynephotography.com, and of course by visiting Clyde's website at clydebutcher.com. I'm always forgetting to mention all the other ways that you can support the podcast, including using our B&H affiliate link, which can be found in the podcast page on my website. I've also created a free tool on my website that includes almost every single lens and camera that's been produced by Nikon, Sony, Canon, and Fuji. The tool is a great way to compare weight, megapixels, and cost, and it's a great way to kind of build out your kit to see how much it might weigh and how much it might cost. There's a lot more in there too, and there are some affiliate links that are embedded in the tool as well to help me out. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for supporting the podcast however you can. I really appreciate it. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.